A lot of tension in the world right now.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Hey, greetings. Nice to have you aboard. We spent plenty of time here over the last couple of months talking about the local politics that affect us so dramatically in our own backyard. But you got to remember, when you elect folks to office, whether they're right in your backyard or whether they're right in the White House, it has major implications on how the world turns. And right now we've got a situation with Russia and missiles and who hit who when and Poland and all that kind of a thing. And I always turn to one of the brightest minds we have in the region here for analysis on these things. Marc Genest, who teaches at the Naval War College and has been there for a couple of decades, joins me here this evening. He speaks on his own when he comes here, but he speaks with a learned mind. But in the meantime, before we even set up any of the stories that we're going to talk about tonight, just as we're taping at 10 minutes till 2 on Thursday, Nancy Pelosi has announced that she is not going to seek the leadership position. Most likely minority leader, of course. Well, definitely minority leader because the House has turned Republican officially last night. So let me do a hot take and just jump to Mark before we get into our usual rhythm here. Thanks, my friend. Great to have you. Politics implicates all sorts of things, foreign policy and the like. What's your gut on Nancy Pelosi saying, I'm stepping down?
Well,
by the way, she is going to remain an elected official. She's going to serve her term, but she is going to, and I'm sure she'll have some input, right? But she is not going to run for leadership.
Well, I think this is actually going to hurt the Democrats because she's one of the few people that can herd the cats, and particularly in the Democratic Party. So I think this will make them more prone to divisions and less effective in going after the Republican counterparts. I mean, she's an extraordinary leader, and even though I don't agree with her on several issues, in terms of her political acumen, she's second to none.
Yeah, so she is, I mean, she has been touted as this amazing scoreboard watcher, coalition builder, someone who concentrates the issues, finds a way to get the whole thing done. While some people might see her publicly and her persona as a little bit stuttering and rambling, at least in the last 10 years or so, reportedly behind the scenes, she's got an iron fist and really knows how to get it done. She does have, despite how you might think about her politics, a deep love for the institution. So there's all those things. Probably you're correct in terms of just being able to be as effective in a unified message. Who knows how the replacement will go? She talked about, you know, legacy ending and a new generation taking over. How will it impact foreign policy, though? I mean, she made that trip, right? The trip to Taiwan, and that was something that you thought was not well thought out, as I recall, only months ago. Put the president on his heels a little bit amidst what has been a one China re-explanation and pressure from China on Taiwan. But in general, what do you think about her impact on foreign policy?
Well, I worry that now that the Republicans have taken over the House, if they're going to decrease aid or try to decrease aid to Ukraine. And at this point, particularly in the winter time, with the European economy slowing down and the American economy having its problems, we need a unified Congress to support increasing aid to the Ukraine, which will probably cost about $45 billion in the next year between the United States and our NATO partners. So if we begin to decline in our support for the Ukraine, then I think it's going to be a very, very difficult time for the Ukrainians to continue to fight the Russians. And it falls right into the Russian strategy, by the way.
Is the Republican leadership chatter about this blather?
No, it isn't, because McCarthy, who presumably will be the Speaker of the House, has to at least pay attention to the hard right of his party. And as a result, he's going to have to at least change this undeniable support for Ukraine, this consistent support, to one that at least targets the resources that we're sending to the Ukraine, and perhaps is a little more interested in overseeing the type of aid that we're giving them. Because people forget that before the war occurred, Ukraine had a reputation as being one of the most corrupt countries in all of the world. So there is a degree of oversight that we probably should have in the weapon systems and the aid that we're giving to the Ukrainians.
All right, there's a good segue there. Let's run a news package from just, I think it was Wednesday night, that updates us sort of on what's going on.
Following an emergency meeting, Poland's president says it's highly probable that the missile that slammed into a Polish border village Tuesday was fired by Ukraine's anti-missile defense. He called for calm as an investigation continues. 2 people died in the incident that came as Ukraine was under a blistering aerial attack from Russia.
And whatever the final conclusions may be, the world knows that Russia bears ultimate responsibility for this incident.
Poland is a NATO member, which means a deliberate attack on the country would require member nations to respond. While in Bali, President Biden met with NATO and G7 allies to discuss the developments.
Russia can and should stop the war. If they're able to do it, they can stop it tomorrow if they wanted to. But I'm glad we're on the same page in terms of supporting the Ukrainian people's right to be free.
With Congress back in session post-election, President Biden is asking for an additional $37 billion in emergency aid for Ukraine, but House GOP leaders have cautioned not to expect a blank check. Ukraine's president says additional aid is desperately needed to help prevent more missile attacks and drive Russia out of Ukraine. He warns that it's just a matter of time before Russia expands its attacks to neighboring countries.
All right, well, that kind of covers some of the stuff that you're talking about there. It was interesting. So we're taping on Thursday. You're seeing this on Friday on Fox, and Sunday night on WPRI 12. You were kind enough to react real quickly when the missile story broke. You know, some folks were thinking, uh-oh, we had World War III on our hands, seemingly. That simmered pretty quickly. But even you and I were talking about Russia having misfired, right, into Poland. Zelensky doesn't seem to want to admit that it might be his own mistake, maybe in part just to keep his own troops happy, right? You tell me.
Well, he doesn't want to admit to it until it's irrefutable that it was their anti-aircraft missiles. So, you know, he's being prudent on
and the
his
bumper
part.
sticker says blank happens, right? So, I mean, lost lives should never be discussed in a nonchalant fashion, but in this awful, awful condition of war, mistakes happen.
And I think the administration has done a very good job. Whether you saw the Secretary of Defense talk about this was essentially Russia's fault to begin with, because they launched 90 missiles across all of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians were overwhelmed. So their anti-aircraft missiles were going everywhere and anywhere to try to prevent the Russians. And by putting the fault clearly on the Russians, even though it probably was a Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile that hit Poland, I think he's putting blame where it should be. So it's a very deft response on the part of the administration.
Why all these missiles now?
Oh, that's a great question. They are now, the Russians, who have really been beaten on the battlefield consistently by the Ukrainians, have now taken a larger strategy, which frankly in the long run may be most effective, and that's going after the infrastructure. In the last month, they have literally hit 40% of the infrastructure of Ukraine, from their water, electricity networks, everything they can. And what they're trying to do is make the Ukrainians suffer through the winter as much as possible. So that, combined with their, you know, the lack of imports of gasoline into Europe, creates not just a regional problem, but a global problem for the economy. So it's a twofold attack. You weaken the will of the Ukrainian people to fight, and you weaken the will of the Europeans and the Americans to continue to aid Ukraine the way they are.
Is it the winter that's the primary reason and motivation for the timing? Because it seems to me that if this is such an effective strategy and leaves Ukraine somewhat defenseless, you wonder why it wasn't up front in this conflict that's now running close to a year.
Well, the reason is because Putin consistently thought that he could defeat the Ukrainians relatively easily. So even after the initial invasion, which failed miserably, he thought that they could regroup and take over. And then there are times when the Russians were literally taking over large swaths of Ukrainian territory. But then the Ukrainians, with massive military and technical aid from the West, was able to mount very effective counteroffensives. So now
in fact, there was a big one just prior to the midterms, where the Russians are literally run out of Dodge.
Yeah, Kherson was retaken by the Ukrainians, which was the first major city taken by the Russians in their initial invasion. So they are stymied on the battlefield, so they're looking for more long-term path toward victory, and that is the decimation of the Ukrainian infrastructure, the Ukrainian economy. By the way, the Ukrainian economy shrunk by 35%. Their unemployment rate is 35% now. So they are taking one hit after another. The capital city of Kyiv, they have 40% of the people in Kyiv have lost electricity, and up to 80% are having a difficult time getting clean water to drink. So their attack on the society itself, the Russian attack on Ukrainian society, is devastating. And it's whether or not the Ukrainians can continue to fight the Russians and whether the West will continue to aid them.
So what happens here when the president says, well, the Russians can stop this at any time? Your depiction is that they've got structural momentum. Why would they stop?
Well, that's the key. In strategy, you also ask which side is time on? Who can continue to fight for the longer period of time? And because we call the Ukrainians on death ground, I mean, they have nowhere to go, one would assume that their will always be stronger. But on the other hand, given the monumental resources and all of the tools of statecraft that Russia has at its disposal, it's going to be a devastating war. And unless Putin decides this is no longer in his interest to do, he can keep putting more and more pressure on the Ukrainians with the hope that the West's resolve will weaken over time.
You worried about that with the Republicans?
Very worried. The Russians never fight well at the outset of any war, but they are great at coming back. And they're willing to take the casualties and take the hit after hit because they're so large and because that is the way that their military operates.
Oh, and with that good news, we'll talk about progress, or what, at the G20, and China too. Stay with us. Meanwhile, in the middle of all this, G20 getting together. Here's the latest.
It's an image we haven't seen before. President Biden standing side by side with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This morning's meeting at the G20 summit in Indonesia is the first time the two men have met in person since Mr. Biden became president. They've had phone calls and video meetings, but this face-to-face sit-down comes at a crucial time, with China and the U.S. increasingly at odds on the world stage. Ahead of the meeting, President Biden shared his expectations.
We just got to figure out where the red lines are and what are the most important things to each of us.
There is tension over China's support for Vladimir Putin as Russia's war in Ukraine continues. And in Taiwan, China has stepped up military drills near the U.S.-backed island. Experts say the U.S. relationship with China is at a low point.
I think both sides realize that if we keep going down the path that we're headed on, that will be conflict.
We want to avoid conflict with China, most certainly in the military sense. I don't think we can avoid tension in terms of diplomatic and economic and political competition.
China is the world's #2 economy and America's main global competitor. The White House hopes to cooperate on issues like climate change, counter-narcotics, and global health.
All right. Taiwan, of course, is also a big sticky wicket. China is in your wheelhouse because you have studied and visited there so often. I always get a big kick over these long tables in these ominous conference rooms with so many people and that space. I mean, we have a yard between us, and there's an intimacy to this. Are they effective? These meetings, do they really close the doors and get some?
Oh, they can be very effective.
I mean, get some real down to earth,
sure,
type of work getting done.
Absolutely. When the cameras are off, that's the best time. And remember that the tables are long for a number of reasons. One, to make people feel that this is an important thing, right? It's grandeur.
Right.
The other reason is there are a lot of aides on either sides, so that they're discussing real important issues, and it's a time for Biden to speak candidly to Xi, and for Xi to do the same. So these are very good meetings.
Does it become? Is it? I mean, clearly, the less involved, the more intimate the conversations, right? So how intimate do these meetings need to be effective?
I hate to give you the answer. It depends. It depends on how far apart they are on issues, how each leader is how much they're willing to compromise, what they need to get out of the meeting. So it really does depend. And in this situation, this is more an airing of concerns on both sides, because the United States and China are really the only hegemonic competitors in the world today. And as a result, China is becoming much more aggressive, much more assertive. They realize that they're a rising power, and they want to act accordingly. And the United States is trying to figure a strategy, which we moved from constructive engagement, which was to try to integrate China as much as possible into the world economy, feeling that they would modify politically as they became more integrated. In fact, it was the opposite.
Yeah, Xi Jinping is not a guy that wants to ease up.
Oh no, he's a dangerous man.
Because?
Because he's smart, because he's aggressive, because the economy is growing, and because their military is growing. So they see themselves as a rising power. They put a lot of money into their military, and as a result, what you're seeing here is that they're emboldened to act more assertively, particularly in the South China Sea, which means it's problematic for Taiwan and the United States.
Who's more nervous at that table when they're sitting across from each other, do you think? Or do nerves even play a role? I think that's what people look at when they say, like, geez, that's a big meeting. Who's tentative? Who's confident? Who feels good? Who doesn't?
I think Xi Jinping is overconfident, because I think there are lots of long-term problems in China's economy, and I think the crackdown, and there's been a massive political crackdown under Xi, and that crackdown will last as long as their economy grows. But there are lots of signs their economy is already slipping because of their horrible policy toward COVID. So their economy is actually shrinking.
Zero tolerance. He's the only guy not wearing a mask at that.
You could never get away with what he's done in the West. It's really that bad. And plus, his treatment of the Uyghurs, his treatment of any political opposition, it's almost Stalin-esque the way he operates.
On Taiwan, temperature seems to have come down a little bit in the last handful of weeks. I'm sure that was on the table too.
Oh yes, that's the #1 issue.
Where do we stand?
Well, I think the war in Ukraine has actually sent some messages to Xi. One, if you think the Ukrainians were tough, the Taiwanese have much better military, much more sophisticated equipment, and the United States. And again, the Biden administration's done a pretty good job of saying, look, we're going to send them more and more sophisticated weapons. And we're actually trying to get the Taiwanese to have a more decentralized defense system that relies on multi-layered defenses against the Chinese. And remember, the Chinese would have to have an amphibious assault on Taiwan. They've never done that in the history of the PRC. So they're not good at these kinds of things. And there are a lot of ways to prevent an assault on Taiwan that the Taiwanese government could be very effective at.
All right. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but there was an announcement this week. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us.
And I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
We began with politics and Nancy Pelosi stepping down from leadership. This is a lingering issue now. Does it have any impact on the country's immediate foreign policy concerns?
I think if President Trump gets into office, that the Ukrainians should be very, very nervous because he's shown a consistent strategy of appeasing Putin throughout his initial presidency. So that worries me. And what also, I think for domestic political reasons, if Trump does not get the nomination, he will tear the ship down. He will do as much as he can to destroy DeSantis or any other opponent that he has to come across. So he believes in the scorched earth strategy. So it's going to be an interesting, fascinating presidential race, and it's going to be really depressing, I think, in the long run.
But what will people have to weigh in terms of, first of all, look, it's 2 years away. I'm not sure. I mean, he's getting out front for all sorts of strategic and ego-based reasons. I don't know if he makes it.
I don't either.
I don't know how he withdraws. I mean, there's a pending indictment. There's all sorts of stuff that he's trying to get out in front of. Right now, it's a distraction more than a heavy weight on the country, it seems to me.
Well, he's doing this for, I think, legal reasons, and also ego. I mean, with him, you can never separate the two. And frankly, he's got a base of about 35% in the Republican Party. If you have multiple individuals running for presidency, remember he was like 15 or 16 candidates when he first ran in 16.
Right.
If he has a large number of people running, he's going to win because all you need is about 30-35% to win some of these primaries. If, on the other hand, it winnows down quickly to he and DeSantis or to somebody else, then you have a chance of him not getting the nomination. But if it's a large field, crowded field,
I just don't know whether, I mean, that's astute political analysis. I guess we can't know for now what it means for foreign policy.
No, and even the big...
Other than what you suggested, the Ukraine liability right there.
Well, for foreign policy, there's another, NATO. The relationship with NATO right now is extraordinarily strong. I would argue it's the strongest since World War II.
And he'd like to bust that up.
And he would be very problematic.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I heard there was a few coming over. Good luck. Watch the dishes. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. And a guest from Black Lives Matter to talk about it. In the meantime, have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. We all deserve it. Relax. Listen to each other. No political squabbles over the turkey. And we'll talk to you on the radio weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRI. Good night.